word, I'm sure many of you have come across this statement called we are in this environment called the VUCA environment. For those of you who may not be familiar with the terms, VUCA really stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It's really about change that's happening so rapid that we don't even know what are those cause and effect reasons behind those change. And quite honestly, we probably don't even know whether there's the right answer to any of those questions. In other words, we are operating in a very ambiguous environment with really nothing, with really no clarity about the future. So a lot of what we're doing are just gambling about the future and trying to see that things happen. So under such a circumstance, under such a changing circumstance, we are going to have a situation where the customer's needs when it comes to a product, and a customer here being, it could be an individual customer, your consumer, or it could be a industrial customer of yours, are going to have constantly changing needs. Again, I'm not going to elaborate on all of these things, but they are probably going to be looking at more functionality from your products, better price points, convenience in the way they consume this, a better experience, a better design. They want more reliability, more performance, more efficiency, and more compatibility with their other products and services that they already have. This is a completely, irrespective of which business you're in, you're going to be facing the situation, and you have to be in a position to respond to these changes. From a service standpoint of view, also, it's not just for the products and manufacturing industry. Even if you're in the service sector, customers are expecting you to be empathetic, to be fair, ethical, transparent. They want to be in control of what they're doing. They want to have options. They want more information, and they want access to your services. So this is the environment in which we are all in at this point of time, whether you're a small enterprise or a large enterprise, but more so if you're a small enterprise. And I think we need to, at this point of time, ask ourselves, are we actually meeting that ever-changing customer needs? Because if we are not, we're going to go into the situation which Jack Welch described, which says that the rate of change outside is much higher than the rate of change inside, in which case we will be doomed for disaster. So that is something which we have to be asking ourselves, which is really the motivating factor of why should we even be looking at Industry 4.0. So where does Industry 4.0 come into the picture here? Industry 4.0, and I think you've probably seen the sketch 100 times in the last 2 days, so I don't want to elaborate into too much detail, but we all know that fundamentally Industry 4.0, which we are in at this point of time, is really about cyber physical systems. Okay, it's about the ability to bring together the cyber world and the physical world and connect them together. What is a cyber physical system? If you want to look into a definition, again, this is just a definition from the US National Science Foundation. Don't worry about the definition, but the point I want to make here and why it's relevant is about why it keeps changing with context. In other words, keep in mind that these cyber physical systems are much better to respond to context and respond to the change. In other words, they are far more dynamic than probably what a normal system in which we currently operate in. So that's the beauty of Industry 4.0. It's really about helping you to respond to change and to react to that context, and maybe to predict and react to that context. So the building blocks, again, I'm assuming you have already picked up these. If you don't already know, there are multiple building blocks, but I put the key building blocks as that being connectivity between things, the Internet of Things and cloud, robotics and automation, AI, blockchain, big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Again, I'm not going to be elaborating on all of these points. I think these are things which are already clear to most people. And I think it's important to just recognize that there are multiple building blocks, but these are some of the foundational building blocks behind a key Industry 4.0 roadmap. So what makes Industry 4.0 possible? I think why is it today and why is it not 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Two fundamental things. One is big data and computing power, because these are two things which are increasing. And I think Indonesia is in a great spot here because a lot of data can be generated in Indonesia given the size of the population. And I think everybody knows that the more the data you have, the better you are in a position to actually leverage that data and bank on that computing power, which, by the way, is getting cheaper and getting more pervasive. And these, when you bring together cloud and IoT, you really have a situation where you are able to have that ability to run those cyber physical systems using machine learning and through cloud technology. So this is why Industry 4.0 is possible today at this point of time. Right. So we spoke about the value chain. We spoke about a generic value chain. But if you look at Industry 4.0, actually it supports the entire value chain in more ways than one. On the one hand, it can support all of those growth aspects which you're looking at, which could be the decentralization of your production, could be about the integrated product development, could be about the ability to respond to supply chain issues, and also about efficiency gains as well. In other words, we already spoke about the digital twin or the factories or the lighthouse where you can control, you can maintain the efficiencies, you can have data-driven quality control and inspection, you can take the human element out of it, you can have predictive maintenance, and you can also have tracking of all of your workforce. In other words, if you look at it, Industry 4.0 contributes to that entire manufacturing or service value chain by A, aiding growth, and B, by giving you that efficiency which you probably need. So you're looking at better performance management, better capability, and better customer responsiveness, which are all key determinants. And then on the other hand, you're looking at energy efficiency, process optimization, as well as labor productivity, which are again efficiency gains which you need to have in case you want to really be getting better at what you do and survive in a world which is extremely hyper competitive. Okay. So these are those two key determinants, and Industry 4.0, as you can see, can supply both of this, all of these things. So I want to kind of get the perspective of the audience here. I have a very simple poll question. You can do two things. One, just go to slido.com and just type in that number Y350, or just take your QR code. I know Indonesia is extremely digital savvy, so just take your QR code, take your phone camera and scan that QR code. I just want your perspective. I know we have about 200 odd attendees here, so I'll give you a few seconds. Is Industry 4.0 relevant for small and medium enterprises? What's the perspective of the audience? I just want to get that feeling. Okay. Not a great beginning, but let's see if that changes towards the end. Okay, we're still in single digits, so I'm looking for more responses. Right? It's at least there's a feeling that a lot more people think it's relevant, which is great. Okay, I'm going to give you another 10, 15 seconds so that those of you who are still getting your cameras out can get this too. Okay, I'm glad a vast majority of you think that it is relevant, which kind of makes sense. So my follow-on question to that is, what are some of the factors that really are making it difficult for us to do 4.0 among SMEs in Indonesia? So this is, put in a keyword or put in a small, again, going to the same, the question would have shifted anyway. If you can just go back and answer in your own words, what's holding you back? What's holding Indonesian SMEs back from implementing 4.0? Less work, knowledge. Yeah, keep them coming. Great, so knowledge. It is so relevant here that we have some, I think even the previous speakers alluded to this point about why it is so important to have the right talent management practices in place. And I can see that as being some of the key determinants. Again, let me give a few more minutes. Right now, I think very interesting. Thank you for your responses. I will wait for another maybe 15 seconds. Regulation, okay. Infrastructure, not regulation and knowledge. These are the key top three at least. Okay, I think we've got a good section, good base of responses. So let me move on and share my perspectives on what I think are probably some of the key determinants. Again, thank you so much. I really appreciate those of you who have taken the thing. So yeah, there's lack of skill in finance, there's regulation, infrastructure, less work, and some of the key answers to that question. Great answers. Thank you. So my perspective on this is that there are three real reasons. One is, I think there's a mindset. There is always a mindset that we need to overcome, that Industry 4.0 is for us, is for in small SMEs. I think as we could see from the responses, not everybody is on board with the fact that it's for small enterprises. It is important that we change that mindset. There are cost issues here. Obviously, it does take some amount of investments to get this going. But I'm also a big believer that one of the primary drivers for Industry 4.0 to happen is knowledge or talent or all of that knowledge capability that needs to be put in place in the event you want to get Industry 4.0 going and being successful. I want to dwell a little deeper into how to overcome some of these things. Let me start with mindsets and costs and put them into one bucket. So when it comes to mindset and costs, I think we have to recognize that the digitalization is a journey. You've got to probably start off somewhere, and you can probably start off with some legacy systems where start with digitization. I mean, digitization, if you know, is very different from digitalization. So taking something that's analog and converting it into digital is digitization, whereas digitalization is a much broader topic where it comes to the generation of data and using things with data and leveraging the data to kind of improve and benefit your customers. So don't mix up digitization and digitalization, but digitization is probably a good starting point where you can start off with ERP systems and convert some of your existing legacy systems to maybe automated systems. That needs to be followed up with the next level where you need to start looking at, now that we have digitization in place, can we kind of connect those things together by using IoT devices, sensors, maybe use the cloud, leverage the cloud, get into AR, VR, where relevant, blockchain. Again, these are all, as we earlier said, the building blocks of a good IoT, of a good Industry 4.0 journey. So connectivity is the next building block. And then once you're done with that, or maybe in parallel, you also start looking at where are those opportunities now that we have those sensors, now we have those IoT devices. Is there an opportunity for us to kind of get into robotics and automation and automate some of those activities? And eventually, when you have most of those things there, you will probably be having enough data for you to say that now that we have the data, can we leverage the data and use the analytics and have machine learning so that we move into a more predictive and prescriptive mode where we know exactly what actions we need to take. We know exactly what our customers are looking for. We know exactly what's the demand and supply going to be. We know exactly what needs to be maintained. So we go into that space eventually. So I think it's about going back to the mindset. I think the mindset needs to be that I don't have to get bogged down by all of these terms called artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc. You can get there. There are plenty of open source options available. Once you get to that initial barrier saying that I'm ready to embark on this journey, I need to get over this current system where I have everything in legacy systems. How do I move beyond that legacy systems, bring in some smart sensors to start with? And those are not very expensive these days. You can get on this journey, you can get down this path in a very simple manner, and eventually move towards, obviously, the pinnacle. And again, it's still a journey. It's never ever reached there because data keeps shifting. Data is not about static data. It's really about data that keeps moving and you get insights on an ever-changing basis. So it's not a destination. Don't mix up and saying that you're not reaching the peak. It's really a journey that you're going to be embarking on. And again, from a cost factor, yes, there are costs involved, but once you start looking at initial baby steps with respect to digitization, you'll realize that it's possible to leverage on the benefits and the gains that you make in the first phase and put that back into the next level. So in other words, look at it as a stepped approach. You don't have to do everything in one shot. You don't have to go and put in a blockchain system right away, but you need to start looking at those baby steps. So this is my suggested roadmap when it comes to overcoming the mindset and the cost issues. Let me move on to the other one, which I'm very passionate about, which is the talent issue, because as has been alluded by the previous speakers, I think talent in Industry 4.0 is extremely critical. And I believe it actually goes beyond 4.0. And I talk about why there's a big difference between talent, the way we do it in Industry 3.0 and Industry 4.0. Because there are three big changes that are happening at this point of time when it comes to 4.0. The first one being that I call this the shifting employment patterns. That's the point I have in the middle. What do we mean by shifting employment patterns? So if you look back at these three industrial revolutions, the first industrial revolution and the second industrial revolution, to some extent, started shifting the movement of people from, from the manual labor to, let's say from agriculture to industry. So the big shift was agriculture to industry, especially with 2.0 and to some extent with 3.0. But as you've gotten into more of 3.0 in the 1970s and all that stuff, the services economy was the one which grew rapidly. So if you look at the employment patterns globally, there's been a shift where there's been a constant drop in agriculture, there's been a constant increase in industry, but after the services economy started picking up, especially with Industry 3.0, you started seeing a decline in manufacturing or a decline in industry and more of services. So that's something which I think we have to keep history in mind when we look at how these industrial revolutions change the employment patterns. Why is this important? It's important because the unique thing about these shifts are they are always shifts that go in a unidirectional way. In other words, when you have somebody moving from agriculture to industry, it's a one-way movement. It's very rare that you have a movement back from industry to agriculture when it comes to employment patterns. Likewise, when you move from manufacturing to services, it's very rare that you have this move back from services to economy, to industry. Now, Industry 4.0 is going to result in really that shift because we don't have, other than agriculture, industry, and services, we don't have something which kind of can accommodate new jobs. Because one thing we're going to keep in mind when it comes to Industry 4.0 is that with the Industry 3.0 was a lot about automation and manual tasks being repetitively done in a better manner. But when it comes to 4.0, it's about boundless cognitive capability. That's the term I use to say that it's not just about automating and a physical activity. It's also about automating that cognitive capability, which usually are done by men, and that's why by humans, and that's why you have the services industry, which grew rapidly in the late 2000s. But with boundless cognitive capability, you run the risk that if we are not able to keep pace with machines, what we are as human beings are really, which is our ability to think, if we lose that ability to think because machines think better than us, I think we cannot move into another sector. We cannot go back to manufacturing. We cannot go back into agriculture. So we are stuck. So we got to keep that in mind. And then the shelf life conundrum. I talk about the shelf life conundrum because on the one hand, we have better medical science emerging, as a result of which lifespans are increasing. So lifespans are increasing at the same time, I think jobs are decreasing because of automation and other factors. So we will be having more people needing employment. We are going to see the employment patterns, but you're going to have the boundless cognitive capability. If you don't manage these three variables well, I use a term called a techno-socio-demographic tsunami in the making. So this is something which policymakers need to address and see that how can we rapidly transform the people in our society and make them ready to take on Industry 4.0, because if we don't do that well, I think we are really up for trouble. And I think the World Economic Organization also recently talked about how the double-dip recession, how the automation coupled with the pandemic has resulted in what they call as a double-dip recession, which requires almost 50% of all workers to be reskilled in the next 4 to 5 years. So that's the urgent need. So if there's one building block that we need to worry about, not just because of Industry 4.0, but in general because of automation, I think it's about talent development, and that's got to be a high priority. And it's not just for Industry 4.0. So those are some of my thoughts. Does it apply everywhere? I think Ibu Gati and Ibu Mira spoke about some great examples. I just wanted to give one example of how a small canteen or a small eatery in Singapore used the pandemic as an opportunity to really recover, and they used digital technologies and adopted digital technologies so that they could be selling a lot of stuff online, and then they made up their revenues and they've recovered and they've made well. I don't want to talk about this because I think some great examples were already shared by the speakers before me. So I'm going to kind of ask you I'm going to leave you with a few key takeaways before I ask my last question. So the first one is, I am of the opinion that it applies to all sizes. It's not just something for the big boys. It is an opportunity for SMEs to become customer-centric. And if you're not customer-centric, you cannot thrive in a VUCA environment that we all live in. It's not a journey. It's a journey. It's not a destination, because you are going to be in this environment where everything's going to be changing and you're going to get fresh data sets at every point of time. You got to start small and you got to gradually take those bigger steps and get there. And as I alluded to just now, reskilling and upskilling is going to be a national priority. It has to be a priority, not just for at the policy level, but for every employer and every individual. People have to take on this as one of the key determinants of how to be successful in a Industry 4.0 world. I'm going to, before I conclude, ask one final question. From what you've heard from all of the speakers so far, what's your perspective on, I think the need for it, I think we probably understand, but do you think Indonesia can make this journey, or are you not sure about it? Again, please scan the QR code. Okay. Yeah, I'll give you a few more minutes. I think we have quite a few participants, so this is your opportunity to give your voice. Well, a lot of you think you can, definitely. That's great. So on that optimistic note, I'd like to end. Thank you very much. Again, my name is JC, and thank you, UNIDO and the Ministry of Industry, for this opportunity to be presenting here. I really appreciate it. And I thank all the previous speakers for great insights. I've really learned a lot by listening to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, JC, for covering all the aspects so well. And as you rightly mentioned, mindset. I could see when the bars were, traveling from left to right for yes and no. I could see that people are so quick to say no than to say yes. And gradually, yes bar was finally, a longer than the no bar. So mindset.
That's a very profound observation, Salim. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, so people generally say quickly no, very, like that. And we have few questions for the panelists. Now, because JC is here, so I would start some of the questions with you. Now, as we move towards Industry 4.0, industrial safety is also one of the challenges. So I would appreciate if you can share your views on industrial safety aspects as per your experience in other countries, which may be very relevant for Indonesia. And second thing is, like, as the usage of infrastructure, IT infrastructure is rising, that soon is going to become bottleneck. In fact, we observe this many times. Even in the Zoominars like this, we have technical glitches. Sometimes internet doesn't work because the backend is not supporting the demand. So if you can share your experiences and the way forward, like how it can be handled, this infrastructure. So these are the two questions for you.
Okay, let me start with the second question first. So if we talk about infrastructure, clearly, yes, one of the things for Industry 4.0 to be successful is cloud and all of it linked together, because that's obviously the backbone on which Industry 4.0 operates. You are obviously seeing new technologies emerge in the space, and as we speak, obviously there are 5G technology being rolled out in different locations, and 5G is going to be a big differentiator when it comes to Industry 4.0, simply because 5G is going to introduce low latency into all of the activities. In other words, the transition time between what you do and the response time is going to be lowered quite dramatically. You also have technologies that are emerging. We talk about cloud computing, but then there's another term I'm not sure if you heard about it called fog computing, which is really about clouds which are getting closer to you. So you're talking about edge computing, and obviously there's also a lot of research happening in terms of computing power itself, quantum computing. So these are all part of the Industry 4.0 arsenal, which will all be coming into play to kind of strengthen that infrastructure that is needed, the IT infrastructure that is needed to support all of these things. The key thing is that these are scalable. I don't believe that this is something which is finite. These are scalable things. I think this infrastructure, the backbone can be always built over time, and there are newer technologies coming. What we need to be wary about is clearly the need to have controls over this. When it comes to controls, again, it was alluded to previously, and I think you asked the question about cybersecurity. Those are going to be key aspects to worry about, because how well are we protecting that infrastructure? That's going to be a very, very important consideration when it comes to Industry 4.0. Let me move on to the first question. So you talked about the impact of Industry 4.0 on safety. That's a great question, and I am very passionate about this because I think Industry 4.0 actually offers an opportunity for us to, I use the word, redefine safety. When I say redefine safety, the conventional view of safety is that safety is all about the absence of an incident or an injury or an illness. So you have those metrics which talk about how many incidents did we have, how many fatalities did we have. Those have been the traditional way in which accidents have been measured, because that's what we got as lagging indicators, which we could go back and see and say that, oh, we are a very safe business or a safe operation because our accident rates are very low. But the reality is we should redefine, and Industry 4.0 provides us the opportunity. We should now redefine safety as the presence of something. And I use the word, the presence of what I call as the 3 C's. The 3 C's being control, capacity, and competence. You obviously know what competence is. You need to have people who know what they're doing and who have the ability to manage their tasks and risks. And it goes back to the other one about human competency, which I anyway spoke about. So competency is one of those C's. Capacity, you obviously need to have the ability to bounce back when you have a tsunami or when you have a storm like the pandemic striking us. So you need to have that adequate resources in place. You need to have that so-called float so that you are able to accommodate those shocks that come time and again. And for which, obviously, you need to have a good business continuity planning process and a dispersed supply chain which can respond to your needs. All of that, again, enabled by Industry 4.0. And lastly, and more importantly, controls. If we have sensor-based controls which give evidence that we have actually put in place controls to prevent a problem from happening, we are in that event actually contributing towards the new wave of safety, which is about safety is the presence of controls, not the absence of incidents. And the simple thing in the second level of that maturity scale, as we start putting in sensors, those sensors can give signals back to say, are we actually having the control in place to ensure that a problem doesn't occur and that we are in a safe environment? I hope that made sense.
Yes, thank you very much. And there is I could see the good linkage between safety and infrastructure, because if we are putting sensors in place and infrastructure is not supporting it, we are bound to have some incident which we do not want. Thank you so much, JSC, for your explanation and answer.